Welcome, everybody. We'll be starting in just a few minutes. Oh, my pad. Thank you. Thanks for the connection.
You have to save the cheetah.
Bump and shake the table.
What do you want to say? Let's add the cow. The cheetah can do that.
That's right. Or a whale, because whales
Oh,
can do
yeah.
anything.
We got water.
You have to save the whale.
Nice. It's the land of make-believe.
Cheetah.
Yeah. And we need to wait a second.
Ooh. That is tricky.
Hey, everybody. We're starting in about 2 minutes.
That might be a way.
All right. That's a little bit somber.
Are they fleeing? Are they
No,
going somewhere to save the whale? We don't know.
We don't know. We'll see.
We don't know if the animals are independent creatures.
Depends on how much anthropomorphization you decide to do. A lot. And we'll just scale. I like the very first thing that Nancy did when she got out the animals was to sort them. What was your sorting criteria?
I put all the dinosaurs together, and I put all. Here, they're still together. Here, all the marine creatures.
Oh, that's right. You wanted to build a shark jail.
That was afterwards.
That's right.
Okay,
Poor sharks.
Later.
Misunderstood sharks. Yeah.
Well, there was also whales.
Yeah.
I just had to get all the dinosaurs out of it.
So natural. With the organization.
Natural taxonomist. How? Leg's broken.
Oh man.
You got like
One of
the
the
starting
lines
gate
got
going
someone.
on over there, kind of thing. Yeah.
It's the pantheon.
The pantheon. Animal pantheon. That's fantastic. Cool. All right, we're about ready to start. 50 seconds here. Hi. Thank you. Well, believe it or not, we are on air, and we have been, but we're officially starting. Welcome everybody to our 4th Spring Development Camp session, and since we're talking about play and imagination, we were going to do something involving play and imagination, but I guess we kind of forgot to. So, we just do what we do here normally every day at Maker Ed, which is bust out the little animals and the box. So we're joined by some fantastic guests here, mostly Maker Core members, host site representatives. Rob is, he'll introduce himself in a little bit, is a friend of mine from Portland, Oregon, and an educator who was on our camp last year. But everybody here has a deep connection towards making children, arts, education, all those things. And we're here to talk about project planning, play, and imagination. And those are such fun topics to talk about on their own that we decided no slides, minimal media. We'll just talk about things and share some stories and talk about what's important when you're really planning great experiences for kids. So let's introduce ourselves here real quick, just briefly.
Hi, I'm Libby.
And you're a Maker Core member, going where?
The Exploratory.
Okay.
I'm Nancy Rink. I'm the program coordinator.
I'm Jeremy Mitchell, the Vista leader.
And our Maker Core member here.
Yeah,
and
Maker Ed.
And I'm Steve Davey, the Director of Education and Communications for Maker Ed, and this is what I love to do. I wanted to start out actually with the words of a child to kind of give us, set the tone and set the mood for imagination and play and the importance. So I want to share a student of mine from many years ago who's going to be, he's about a junior in high school right now, and this is an example that of the role of imagination in play and learning. And so it's going to show a little, this clip is about 1.5 minutes, and let me pull it up here. It'll be jerky, this video, but you'll be able to hear it all right. So. And
Men in my head.
Really? What do they do?
They control me.
Really?
Yeah.
How many of them are there?
200.
200 men in your head control you?
Even 200 women.
There's 200 women there too?
Yeah, and there's also wars in my head.
Oh, wow. What happens when those wars are happening?
Because sometimes when I get water in my head, water people get in my head. Right? And the people don't like that.
What do they do then with the water?
Then they have to blast them, put salt water in them, then they explode.
Are you okay when it explodes?
Yes.
Really?
I don't even feel it.
Really? How do you know about it?
I know about it because I can see them. I always look at them because there's a little small camera in my head.
There's a lot in your head. Lots of people in your head.
And the camera's that big.
Really?
It's everywhere in my body.
Wow. What else goes on in your body?
Not that much of things. Now let's see if I can control all these guys at once.
Okay.
cool. So men in his head, and you know, I have a lot to say about this, but I'm just curious about initial impressions, just about what you've just seen. What you notice, what you wonder about what he's saying.
I'll say something.
Yeah.
I can relate, actually. How old is he? What's his age?
In this video, he's in 2nd grade.
Okay. So I actually had an experience when I was about that age as well. I don't know if I literally felt like there was men in my head, but I definitely played. I had a big field out by my my house, and I used to play that there was all these little guys in my head that were basically driving me. I don't know if anybody, it was almost like I played it. My imagination was like my body was just a big machine, and I would run through these fields acting like I was a big machine knocking things down. And so what he's talking about, I was like, I kind of had that going on too when I was about that age.
I did too. Raise your hand if you had that going on in your head a little bit. Thoughts. It's just an example of how kids are making sense of their world, and you could hear in his voice the story that he's telling. He believes with such utter conviction. This is just a theory that he's got, but to him it's very real. And this particular child, especially, was very fond of telling stories like that he could very much just come up with and be so imaginative, and it was so beautiful. What's interesting to me about this video was what I didn't do to shut down what he was saying, because I could have very easily shut down what he was saying. And kind of the point of this was that at this time I had been teaching at this school for 2 years, and I'd been in college for 10 years studying physics and biochemistry and pharmacology and all those things. And I've been researching as a biochemist for 6 years, studying brain chemistry and studying the figurative and literal men in our head that go around and all the signaling between cells and everything. So I had a lot personally to say about what he was thinking, about what's inside him and controlling. But I didn't want to bring that into this world. I didn't want this knowledge or this, hey, did you know that there are little cells, and this tendency to explain things too much or to bring it in too early. I was just curious what his thinking was, and I'm glad that I just kept listening and playing, and that I gave him the chance when working with Lego, this conversation was initiated when we talked about control. He's controlling these Lego little creatures right there, and I was curious about what was controlling him in his head and what his thoughts were. So it wasn't a part of a planned part of what this was going on in this project, but it was an opening that I'd given him by just being curious about what he was thinking. So I like that, and I like that at an earlier time I might have just given him a little lecture about cell physiology and nerves, and because I too, when I was a kid, thought little people running around inside my body taking care of things, because of course I would think that. All right. Does anybody have a story to share when they were young of something, a theory or something about the world that they had developed for themselves, kind of came about through play or through stories that you told yourself and maybe believed for a while, or maybe still do? This goes for anybody on air or here in person.
I know I saw that Jim Carrey movie, The Truman Show, which should not have been shown to a 6-year-old. I was convinced I was on The Truman Show, and like that there were people watching me and controlling my life. And after you see that, it kind of sticks with you for a really long time. You like 20 years later, here I am going, I don't know, maybe there is a camera watching me.
Little cameras inside you too, like they're this big. So,
There's one now.
that's right. we are being watched.
Yeah.
Your nightmares come true. So, oh, that's cool. So, when it comes to project planning, part of why I put together Play and Imagination with something that seems like very structured, this project planning, is to always keep in mind our audience. When you're building and designing things, and when you're trying to put together experiences for kids rather than just activities, something memorable, something meaningful, and something that they can really own, the easiest hook, I think, is through Play and Imagination, what comes naturally through children. So kind of folding these all together and conflating that conversation because of the importance of all those things. But you can plan to have activities be ones that bring out rich play experiences. Materials often invite that. In everybody's experience in education, what have been some other ways of inviting play and stories in what you've done with education and stories or tinkering or those sorts of things? Anybody have an example of ways they've kind of, or times they've seen stories arise from the things that you've offered?
Yeah, I have something to add. So recently we just finished our project on birdhouses. So we made one from scratch, with each of our girls. And that was a really long project. And before we got started, I wanted to kind of create an environment, or like talk about the client, which would be the bird in this case. And the girls really imagined, they grew attached to the bird that they imagined. So we learned about them just a little bit. And I was really inspired by Emily Piloton's. She did this with her girls, and they're also 5th graders. And she made right-angled birdhouses. And she suggested to learn a little bit about birds. And she suggested this book, Avian Architecture. So we kind of talked about, what if you were a bird, what would you like?
Oh.
It developed as the project went on. And I guess the best part of it was when we were making, using the hole saw and making the holes for each bird. Some of the girls had a very distinct image of what their bird looked like. So they would look at me and say, my bird's not going to fit through that hole. But it just made a way for us to really ask questions and kind of further, like if something was, if they wanted to add something to their house, like we could always bring it back to that client, that bird, and imagine their world and how they would see it.
Fantastic.
So that was really cool.
Any other examples? I know, Rob, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot here.
Good.
Last year you shared, and I know you've continued to work, we shared the preview of your zombie apocalypse themed tinkering camp on, which is awesome. So I'm curious, how did you go about planning your camp to include that narrative, how to introduce it, and how did it differ from how you typically would have planned for a non-narrative based tinkering experience?
Well, a little context for how that came about. At the tinkering camp that we've been doing, one of the things I was just realizing is that playful element that will carry kids deeper into things when they start making it their own. And just like the idea of these birds, like when it becomes their thing and not just a project they're working on, it can sustain them for long periods of time. And my experience in the Tinker Camp over several years was that when we had projects like we had, robotic type projects or structure projects or flight, that the making in itself wasn't powerful enough for the kids that I had, which are 8 to 13-year-old kids, to really, for most kids, for probably about 75% of the kids, to really sustain them over periods of time. But my own experience with teaching is when the kids really start to play and have fun and kind of turn things into more of a game and bring it into their world, that's when things would really last for a long time. So the planning around the idea of having a narrative for these projects was really to try to figure out what might be a narrative that would capture the kids' attention, and what would be something that that wouldn't require me to keep moving it along, but that their imagination could kind of take control of it. So the idea of the zombie apocalypse, that was just one idea, because it seemed like for some reason there's some zombie interest in the culture right now. I personally am not really interested in zombies. But it just seemed like that was something that age group might find fascinating. And the camp itself was a survival camp, so the idea of playing with survival and the potential of zombies coming, the zombies never came, but they had all these challenges that they had to face, and a lot of the kids started really incorporating the idea of the zombie into their own play and into their own making, and that really came with this bigger idea of play was vital for it to happen, and I was lucky enough in this situation for it actually to happen really well, or it's happened several times. There's been other narratives that we've tried that haven't quite carried that same power, that same oomph. Like we did one last year that we're going to try again that has more of a space theme, and that it wasn't captivating enough for the kids.
Interesting. Yeah, it just all depends on the kid, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, and the collection of kids. I mean, it's not just one kid; it's the group that you have together. So.
I know I was able to visit part of your zombie apocalypse the first summer that you did it, and one thing I noticed about having a narrative-based experience was that the kids owned it so much and believed in it so much that it actually freed you to give you more time to observe and to set things up behind the scenes and to record and document in a way that might not have happened if you had to be the gatekeeper for all materials or all things or what came next.
Yeah, and I mean, one other thing to kind of refer back to that student of yours that you were referring to earlier, and just really listening to what was going on, it really freed me to really try to listen to where the things were going rather than worrying about where we were going to end up with the project.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that came about in the first, part of the camp was at the beginning, the tools and supplies were all spread everywhere and it was kind of had this apocalyptic feeling. And we made an intentional effort not to get involved unless the kids asked us, and they had like a card they could use. Each kid had one. But the first day, kids were like trying to build things and look for things, and the place, it was like total mess. Like it was a total pigsty kid situation.
Yeah.
And we were watching, like kids were like, "Where's the hammer?" And we'd watch kids step over the hammer to break things to get up. It was just like crazy. And the partner was like, "Oh, we need to sit them down and have them think about organization." And I said, "Well, let's just wait. Let's just wait and see what happens. I know it's like our adult need to jump in and control things." And what ended up happening over the next couple of days, the kids started organizing on their own, but not in any way that an adult would do it. They had tools, supplies, food, and all this stuff, and it was all organized by color. So kids were like, "Oh, I'm looking for the hammer. Oh yeah, it has a yellow handle. It's in the yellow pile." And it was awesome. They, like this organizational thing that I would never have thought out.
Yeah.
And there was one kid that was in charge of that, and he became the keeper of this system, and it was a brilliant thing. It was awesome.
Maybe the future is color coded.
Yeah.
We'll come back to more about your camp later on, Rob, because I can compare and contrast to my camp and different, slightly different approaches. But I'm curious from Kenneth and Anna in particular, or is it Anna or Anna?
Anna, yeah.
Anna. You both have artistic backgrounds in a sense. I'm curious about the experiences you had, or do you have any memorable times when you were invited through a project work to really be deeply involved in a story or something creative that stands out, or perhaps something that you provided?
Well, I was thinking of something to share that relates to the video clip that you showed.
Okay, yeah.
right now, with one of my classes, it's kids that are about 6 years old. We're working on this animation project that's basically teaching them how to put sound into video, very simple concepts. So we started with having the class record like real animal sounds all together as a class, like all of you make owl sounds or all of you make puppy dog sounds. And then they got to animate them by making them out of clay. But the next iteration of that was they came up with their own imaginary animals and imaginary sounds that these animals would make. And it became like much more exciting. And now we're taking that whole concept and doing it in green screen, which is like really cool. And it's, having fun with that.
That's awesome. What were the factors about planning that? What kind of things were you thinking of when you planned for this to happen? And did you anticipate them getting so involved into it? What kind of questions did you have in advance?
One of the questions that we started with was, how do you think this works? Like we saw clips like Carl's Very Hungry Caterpillar and paused it at certain points, and then they got to guess how the caterpillar moved, or also with the green screen, how do you think this works? Oh, maybe they put them up in the sky and filmed them up there, or maybe they switched out something in the back. They arrived at those answers themselves. And in terms of going from real material into imagined material, I think that provided a really good scaffolding, kind of gave them the skill set to be more self-sufficient with the skills of animation and creating sound, and then they were able to make their imaginary stories or animals come true. So that's part of the structure.
Well, the beautiful thing is they got to capture their stories and share them in another way, right? I think that's just beautiful. Yeah, Kenny, you've never stopped telling stories, I can tell. How did you start?
I'm actually reminded of. I'm not sure where I was, and I'm not sure who the people facilitating the program were, but I do remember the activity. It started as just a Lego robotic car project, and although it's unfathomable to me right now, somehow I wasn't interested at all. And I was kind of sitting out in a corner drawing space gerbils, and all I wanted to do all week was draw space gerbils and comics about space gerbils. And one of the workshop facilitators came over and told me, why don't you turn your Lego robotic car into a space gerbil? You can use other materials, put paper on it. It ultimately ended up, the idea was that we would all make films with our robots in the end. So everyone ended up making a character, like someone made a little throne with a doll that rode around on it.
That is too cool. It's amazing how transformative any one particular experience can be in any environment. I think if you think about the directions that you've gone in life, maybe what was it that led you to want to do MakerCore? What was it that drove that curiosity? We all have the potential to make huge changes in people's lives by providing really memorable things. I have a little example of this, of the power that all of you have here, just for fun. I found this Life magazine not too long ago, and what drew me to it was this headline of, our urgent teacher problem in pay, overwork, and training, and you can see the date here is 1958. That could be a deadline for today, right? And then I finally noticed, oh wait, this is a teacher from Oregon, from Portland, in fact, where I'm from. And I was like, well, that's kind of cool. And look at that, he's a maker teacher. He made his own demonstration in science, and I thought, wow, this guy probably was pretty influential in his class. He probably was a memorable and great teacher. And I put it up on Facebook, and I get a little message from my dad. Hey, that's my high school teacher. I was in that classroom when this picture was taken. This guy changed my life, according to my dad. My dad went on to be many things in his life, but one of them was an electronics technician. And so I look at this now and I go, there's a little bit of me in here through my dad, and the power of what he took time to do in his own garage and make and offer made an impression on my dad and in turn me. So an amazing coincidence in some ways, but also an illustration about these small little things that can happen that can make a memorable teacher, maybe one or two in your life, can really shape your future. So they plan for those things to happen, or they plan to allow them to happen. So the more that you think about a situation and providing that, the more likely you're to have a good outcome. I've asked everybody here that's participating online and in person to think about some words. This is my way of folding in some pedagogy here. And you can play along at home as you're watching this. So there's 6 words to think about here. Structure, guided, and open, and project, problem, and inquiry. And I wanted to just share these 6 words because they relate to a lot of different pedagogy questions. And research has shown that people usually only remember 4 to 6 vocabulary words per presentation. Maybe these are the ones. So these are some powerful words when it comes to approaches and ways of planning projects. And before saying anything more, I'd like to, without even knowing exactly, or maybe you do know, what these words mean, pick the blue word that means the most to you and the green word that means the most to you in terms of your learning style or how you might prefer to teach. Just guessing what that might mean by these words alone. So just take a moment to do that, everybody that's here, and pick two together. So you're going to have 1 blue and 1 green, and just kind of go with your gut. Don't think it too much because there's no one way, or we know we like learning in different ways, but so pick 1 of each. You guys got yours picked on the. Okay. Libby, you got yours. Okay. So Libby, what is your choice?
Guided project.
Guided project. Okay. And your instinct, guided project. How about yours?
I would say guided inquiry.
Guided inquiry.
Yeah.
Open problem.
Open problem. Mine's open inquiry. How about you guys that are participating over there? What would be your choices, Anna?
Guided inquiry.
Guided inquiry.
Yeah.
Kenna?
Open problem as well.
Open problem. Rob? Open inquiry. Why is my friend Rob my friend? Sylvia, what did you choose?
Guided project.
Guided project. Fantastic.
We all have matches.
Yeah.
There's some things in common. And you might think about this differently. This might be our preference, but maybe we wouldn't necessarily teach in the same way that we like, or maybe it wouldn't always be the most effective. I've had to work in my life to make sure that because I enjoy open-ended things that are based on questions, that I provide more opportunities for kids to be guided a little bit more, for example. Maybe Maker Corps members to be guided a little bit more. So, rather than leaving things completely open-ended, which sometimes I like to do. So I've learned by respecting other people's differences here. So just a little vocabulary. Project is what we're familiar with. You might start with, when you're planning something, a project. What is it that we're going to make? And you set it and you tell the kids that's what we're going to make. A problem approach that Nancy likes is what problem we're going to solve. We don't know what the project is yet, or what we're going to do with it, but we know that there's something to be solved, and it's a real meaningful, or at least meaningful to the kids, kind of problem. Inquiry that Jeremy and I have and that other folks have is questions that are powerful and meaningful to the kids. So you don't have a project in mind, you don't necessarily have a problem in the world pictured yet, but you have some questions that are meaningful that you provoke or you give. So those are the, and then the approaches. Open, structured, guided. I think they're pretty self-explanatory. Open-ended stuff. Structured is kind of providing some scaffolding and some guidance, but it's more based on I'm setting the tone. I'm telling you what's happening next and what's coming on, and and then guided. Where do you guys think most teachers in a traditional school system fall under for their style? Structured would be one of them. So we encounter this a lot, and this happens a lot in college, right? And yeah,
Slightly.
we have some slight feedback from somebody, so I'm not sure if our guests online can mute when they're not speaking. We'll take care of the echo that we got going. I don't know which one it might be. That sound. So we agree that a lot of schools are very structure-based.
Yes.
Yeah. And they can be all over the board in terms of different levels of inquiry, project, and problem, but a lot of times they don't have any of these at all, right. And they're very much based on knowledge and facts and testing. So the beautiful thing is that we have many approaches that are compatible with making in many ways that you can take on in any way. But yeah, this structured thing, some people still respond very well to a structured environment. And if you want to have something done very efficiently and very quickly, you can have a little mini structured lesson as long as you open up, I think, to the time when you might be a guide or a facilitator for open experiences. So, what do you guys think about factors of planning that involve these sorts of things? Or did the definitions I gave for these words kind of jive with what you were thinking of when you chose these, or do you have different thoughts about these words?
I'd actually like to add one other column to kind of think about.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think about in terms of planning is actually the outcomes of what's going to happen. And and so you have your project, problem, or inquiry, and you kind of set it up a certain way. But then is your outcome like you are going to build a rocket, which is a very closed outcome, or fits much more into that structured thing. Or do you have some freedom for the kids to explore, within a range of possible outcomes, or do you have a much more open-ended outcome altogether? And I think thinking about outcome is really valuable for thinking about planning. Like that's vital to me, at least as an educator. That actually comes first. What do I want the experience to be, and how do I want it? What's the end result of that?
Right. I think that sometimes, and then I forget about it other times as well. So I'm glad you brought that up. Any other thoughts on these approaches or these words?
I was thinking of problem. If you have, say, an open task, then that task or project that a student might self-define along the way while just tinkering might lead to smaller sub-problems, which create little sub-projects that turn into other sub-projects, probably end somewhere. And sometimes lead them down a road where they actually ask a question leading them to an open problem.
Right. Absolutely. I think your point is extremely valuable. You could get to every one of these, using just one of these approaches initially when you plan does not preclude others. You could have different phases. When I was teaching math, for example, I would very much sometimes start with something that was very structured, very mini lesson, and then allow them to explore on their own, and then come back together with a little bit of guidance. And so that was kind of playing with all these different modes of approaches for what was most effective when. But your point is awesome, that you can really do something more with any of these, and what arises is what you can pay attention to. It's what emerges from the process. So that's cool. Any other thoughts on these words and how they might be helpful for planning? Would it be helpful for you, or are you already using these sort of ideas and questions in your mind when you're planning out your experiences and stuff that you're working on?
I think if I can speak, the inquiry-based approach is really important to me because it gives some insight as to how kids are processing information. So if they're allowed to imagine the answer to how something works, then you sort of know how to approach it. That's
fantastic. Anybody else familiar and use most often the inquiry-based approach? Rob had it down as a preference, and I know that's my initial background for sure. So starting with questions as a planning process, and maybe desired outcomes or possible outcomes is another way to think about it, right? As well as like it could go this direction, it could go here, but I'm at least prepared for this. What if the kids decide to do this in the camp, or in the activity, or in the experience that they're having? Any other thoughts or questions about inquiry, or any open or guided, or any of these approaches?
What comes to mind right now for DIY Girls, we're getting ready to put together our showcase for the end of the year. And this is a time where the girls get to show what they've made or what they want to make to their friends and family. And I wanted to go about it in a way that, so when I presented, okay, we're going to do this showcase, a lot of the girls said, oh, what's a showcase? So I kind of wanted to take a step back and throw questions back at them concerning, okay, well, I don't want to give them an idea of what a showcase should be, so I wanted them to create that idea for themselves. So we ended up with many different words that they. So we ask questions like, okay, where at, or what do you invite your family to? So we have words like the museum, parks, party. So in the end, they have a list of words they could jump off on and create activities with those words in mind. So the girls are creating different projects in groups. So it started off with as a very open project, but we're guiding the process. So we ask them, we have them in groups because I know a lot of our girls, in order to be efficient, and in this case we have a deadline, it's good to be in groups. And once they know they have a client, I realized, and the client being their family or the people, the teachers that we invite, I realized that group work is really effective. So yeah, we're doing that, and they have it's turning into like a carnival-based showcase. So we have a lot of games, but we also have this idea of showcasing your work in a museum-type look. So instead of we've changed showcase to not just one idea, but many concepts. So it becomes their own party.
I'm thinking about right now how useful it is to have a deadline or an event that you're working towards. Am I right? Have you guys found that useful in your work artistically and education-wise, having deadlines or at least midterm goals? I see Kenny smiling. You have deadlines in your work that helps keep you motivated?
Yeah, I usually keep a pretty strict calendar, but I kind of alternate between periods of absolutely no calendar and then suddenly a strict calendar.
When you get closer.
Yeah. Exactly. What else keeps people motivated time-wise and showcase-wise or event-wise?
One thing I've noticed is that so in general I tend to keep things very, very open-ended. In cases where I'm teaching animation and game programming, I might give them some software, give them 1 minute of introduction, and just say, go make stuff. I've actually found that some kids become extremely overwhelmed and anxious with all of that. I think you mentioned this earlier, Steve. So one thing I found that's helpful is sometimes to, instead of necessarily telling them what to do, try giving them a constraint that doesn't, at least in the context of animation, not a story constraint necessarily, but even one like make a 2D animation using only keys on your keyboard and have them move around. Something like that can be very motivating and help them, feel less pressured somehow that they have this huge space of possibilities and they have to impress you.
To be transparent, we're working on that with MakerCore. Would you say it's like we don't know how to throttle it perfectly? Obviously, we try to give you this possibility box worth of things to replicate the experience on how you might get stuff. But for some people, it is very overwhelming. You don't know how to start. Your learning style is, like almost anxiety. You got all this stuff. Am I expected to use it all? Do I have to? The answer is no. But but you're invited to, and so we try to create these project sessions by the week to keep people motivated and at least a little bit focused, and then these little mini challenges to keep it even more. But even the challenge I gave in Lego was very unconstrained in a sense. It could have been so. I'm very much open as we continue to work together in this next week, in particular for the spring camp, but throughout the summer, because we will have more summer development camps. What are the kind of constraints that are most useful for you as a community? We want to learn more about this process because we are inviting you to be like kids, in a sense, and to learn from this process. And we don't want to be too open-ended. We don't want to be. We don't want to be too strict either. We don't want to be too structured. I know. I don't think there's any danger of that. We don't want to be too chaotic. And I think there's a great deal of that. Yeah. We're coming from a good place. So what's most useful for you? We do have your survey results, which is packed full of fantastic questions, and it took us a long time to get them. But thank you for those that responded. We can now go through and see all of your questions that you had before the camps and things that you hope to have after the camp. We'll do another survey post-camp to kind of follow up on that to see whether that happened, and then an after-summer survey to see how things have changed. We can now look at those questions and start to plan our summer development camp sessions targeted on those questions very specifically. number one of all the requests of what you all wanted out of Maker Core Camp was more making and more diverse skills, like the invitation to do something you haven't done before, which is part of the reason that the possibility box has so much variety. So we're confident we provided you with that opportunity. Make use of it, and don't worry about when it happens. It could happen sometime in the summer. It could happen after finals. Many of you are in right now, or soon to be after. Am I right? Some of you are graduating. We know that 70% of you are involved in school in some way, which is a very tough time. So no matter when things happen, no matter when you watch this particular thing, it's never too late to introduce yourself. Never too late to do anything ArtBot related or eTextile related, or just build whatever you want out of the box. And we will do some things that are a little bit more structured. For example, we have a study group started for the Galileo. We have folks from Intel that will come in and hold office hours to help with that. We're actually hiring some people that will be doing project work around the Galileo. Part of their hours will be to support you as Maker Core members in your work with Arduino or the Galileo. So, oh no, we can't use this video because a copyrighted song is playing as a ringtone in the background. But it is the phenomena. Hopefully the YouTube filters won't scrub that one out. Right. Anyway, I'm sorry about that little mini informational rant about our intentions, but we here at Maker Core are trying to be this balanced and to honor the ways that you like to learn, and we like to plan for it. So what is it that's going to be most attractive to you to allow you to do your job this summer? Give us some feedback. Say, Steve, give us more constraints, or Steve, lay off and just let us play, or don't worry about it. Let us know. I'm done with that information thing.
Ran over.
Ran over. I do that. You can say timeout. Yeah. Back to play and imagination, or any stories you might have from your youth, things that made you you, that might give us all insight in this planning process. That's an open-ended constraint, but it does invite a story that's interesting or fun.
I have a story.
Yeah.
It's the story about how I got really, really into volcanoes. And it stems from, I don't know if any of y'all played that game where you pretend the floor is lava.
It's a universal game. It's a universal game.
The first time I ever played, I just got really into that game. I thought it was the best thing ever. And then I started watching. I went to the library, tried to find all the, I wanted to watch volcano videos. I just would go there and watch volcano videos, read all about volcanoes in encyclopedias, started building like little mini volcanoes in the dirt. I just had everything was a volcano, with my blankets in my bed were volcanoes, and I was the lava popping out. It was just my poor mom. I wanted my sisters to be volcanoes, and I had like this whole thing of like, I had to be the lava. That was the part. I wanted to be the lava, and then I would jump out. So I just got really into it, and then started reading lots of different stories about volcanoes, and that sort of merged into the little science projects of doing the volcano, baking soda, and everything. So that was totally unplanned for, but.
I love it. How would you go about planning on allowing for that experience in a school or in a camp, or this universal love of lava and the perceived danger of hot lava? That brings up a point about perceived danger. Pretended or perceived. It's a very powerful thing. Am I right, Rob? At camps, children think they're doing something. They're doing something dangerous. Oh my gosh, your attention is right there. It comes up in safety a lot. If you really kind of play up the danger of something that they're working with, it gets them more involved to create the rules about how it's used. And you can tell awful stories about. You don't have to scare them, but volcanoes and hot lava. Any other exciting things from childhood? I know we have interesting people here that are still living their childhood. So, anybody?
I remember when I was a kid, I don't remember where I was. They had these like weird shaped blocks that when you put them together in the correct way, you could make an arch. And I don't know why. It wasn't that exciting. It was like a 2-minute project to put together an arch, and then I'm still making arches. I'm still doing it. I don't know why. It's interesting. And now I understand the physics behind it, versus before I was like, I understand the gravity is gonna. I didn't get it. Now I know the terminology. But arches are really cool.
You probably cared more about arches when you learned about them later in life, right? You had a context to put it on. That's why I don't mind being publicly skeptical of the flipped classroom approach. I know that it's effective for some and it's a good choice for some, but for many, it's being told something before they're allowed a chance to discover it for themselves. And I'm not a huge fan of that. There's not as much context. Stanford has actually done research that very definitively showed that children retain more, are more curious, and will get something more out of it, something that they're learning if they're given a chance to explore with it, ask questions with it first, rather than being told the things first. You guys nodding about that, or has that been your experience?
I was just wanting to bring up the point of using flexible materials and flexible ideas when program planning. It reminds me of when I was a kid. Our family has a small grocery store, and I used to get dropped off there, and I was maybe like 6, 7, and I didn't have any blocks or anything, but we had those packs of coins, like pennies, and my dad had a bunch of them, right? So I would just I would use those as Lincoln logs, basically. And my dad, he realized that, that's not going to go down for too long, because he would have to destroy my creations, and I didn't like that very much. Which brings up a point of ownership, which is a big deal with 5th graders. But yeah, so he ended up buying me some Legos, and that was my first experience with that, and Connects. And he actually would set them up, not all the time, but he would set them up for me in a way that invited me to play. So I would wake up in the morning and he would just have them out, which I think is really great. And I think also really inspired me to do what I'm doing now in a way. So using those flexible materials, I think, is really important.
I love that. I love starting from materials and just imagining what's possible with them. When I thought about doing this before here, I was like, I love these little blocks and the constraints that they provide by being just one and the same. And animals I chose because when it comes to actually playing and having stories that are told, animals are kind of this beautiful, in a way, gender neutral and age neutral way of inviting play. When I went to get these animals from Toys R Us, I found it curious that they were sold out of dogs and cats. Which says something about the popularity, universal popularity of dogs and cats. So if you're looking to invite in any material storytelling, I would recommend getting dogs and cats. So we have farm animals, but the materials that you select, how constrained or how widely varied they are, that's how I run my whole tinkering camp. I've not done any narrative-based work like Rob has done, but I have allowed and invited for a lot of play by throwing in little elements like this among the things that they're taking apart and tinkering with, and then play naturally arises, or having them connect things together and all of a sudden a story arises. But the material flexibility, Sylvia, that you're bringing up, that's probably one of the biggest key things about what we'll be doing this summer for project planning.
Great.
Any other thoughts about materials and flexibility or anything else?
I just wanted to add very quickly. Oh, sorry, Rob.
No, go ahead.
So I brought in a sea animal box of those little animals, and I had a girl cut off a turtle head and put it on a ring, and had a lot of weird things going on, but I enjoyed all of it. Take it away, sorry.
That's cool. Yeah, Rob, you had something you were going to say?
Well, I was just thinking about what you're talking about, the dogs and the cats, and I started thinking, well, why those particular animals? And I wonder if those are animals because kids have a relationship with that type of animal, and the importance of relationship as a starting place in a lot of this work. And not just the relationship, but the relationship to kids' own experience. So, I'm thinking about a planning project that we did with our tinkering camp. We decided we run our tinkering camp out of a middle school, an alternative middle school in Portland that gets a pretty rough crowd of kids that haven't made it in other schools. And it's not really a last chance type of place, but We were approached by them this past year to set up a tinkering experience for them throughout the whole year. So we've been working with them just a volunteer basis. And we came in thinking, oh, we're going to provide all these open-ended experiences, and it's going to be really cool. And the narrative was going to be around prosthetics and having kids design prosthetic arms and things like that, you know, as a tie into this other health work that they were doing in another class. And the kids that were in that group, we brought all these materials in, and there was no relationship with them and us, but they had no relationship with the materials at all. So some of the kids had never even picked up a hammer. And we asked them to do pretty open-ended things,